This episode is uncomfortable. Names are named, history is corrected, and this conversation is completely unfiltered.
One year they had, I think I played on more hits than anybody that year. And they had a Grammy for the musicians. They gave me an honorable mention. They didn't even want to do that. The drum magazines was null and void.
TrevBeats show, TrevBeats show. TrevBeats show, TrevBeats show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to introduce the legendary Mr. James Gadson. What's up, man? How you doing?
Man. You got it. You got it. So great to be on your program, man.
Oh, man.
Of all the programs, it's great to be on yours.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you coming on because I know you don't do it a lot, and it's a blessing, man, and it's a privilege for us to have you here on my platform, and I really appreciate you making this time. So, I mean, listen, I know there's some people that are up under a rock, but you know what? I'm gonna just bring them up to speed if they don't know, because this is some staggering information even for me. There's a modest, 500-600 records that they have you on the internet, but I'm sure it's way more than that because I'm sure a lot of stuff wasn't even being counted, in some of those earlier days. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And before we get to how that all happened, can you tell everybody, your upbringing, where you're from, and where the whole thing with drums, where did the love with drums start?
Okay, I'm from Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay.
The home of Charlie Parker. And,
Yep.
it was a musical city. However, I didn't intend on being a drummer. My father was a drummer, but he did not want me in the music business because he had a rough time. He didn't drive a car and he couldn't read music because he came out of the country. And, he did the best he could as far as drumming. However, I was zip zap on farther up. I was a doo-wop singer. We had a group and we made records, my brother and I and three more gentlemen on the federal label. I think I was 14 years old. And our records came out at the same time as James Brown. But he had a better record than we had, and then I'm glad because my mother probably wouldn't have let me go on the road, which was a good thing.
I see.
But anyway, I hadn't planned on being a drummer. So I came out of the Air Force. I went into the Air Force.
Oh, okay.
4 years. During that time, my brother had a band. I didn't know it. And he had a working band. He was a guitar player. He had to learn how to play guitar and had a working band during that time, 4 years. When I came out, he hired me because he was, was my brother. He loved me. So he hired me. I could play 2 or 3 chords on the keyboard and I could sing, do the Little Richard stuff and all that stuff was out doing that time.
Right.
So the bass player left the group to go with a guy by the name of Jay McShann, who was a famous blues jazz. A lot of people don't know who he was in the 30s and the 40s.
I see.
And the drummer could play bass, and he didn't want to play drums anymore. So he said, "Man, he said, man, why don't you take it over?" Well, I had played snare drums.
Mhm.
The little studying that I did in school was trumpet, and I didn't really pay much attention to that because I was wild, and the doo-wop thing was happening, and I was just out.
Yeah.
And guess said, "Well, man, you play the drums. Why don't you try to play?" I said, "Oh well." They kept, insisting that I would try to do this, so I started practicing and got to where I could play a little bit, and I started playing, and I would ask different people for advice and all that.
Yeah.
However, I did know how to play a paradiddle because we had a teacher during the American Legion that I played snare drum. During that time, the baseball teams were segregated, and our big thing every year was to march to the stadium where the black baseball teams played. So I could play snare. This drum and bugle corps. They had the bugles and the tenor drums and the snare drums and all that stuff. I played snare drum. I could play that, but I had never played a set of drums. So I started to messing around with it and start playing. And, I got to where I could hold a beat and play, play a little bit. And I would ask for advice from different people. And I practiced and I got to where I got to be pretty cool. And I played with my brother for a minute and we went down south. A guy had us thinking that he was the promoter. And he had us down south, man. It was pretty rough for us because he had us portraying people that were stars in the South, Otis Redding and people of that nature. Man, we would literally get run out of the nightclub. I mean, people would almost shoot. One night, some people did start shooting.
Wow.
It was pretty. It was. I think about it. It was pretty
And
dangerous.
let me just ask,
We
around what years was this, just to set it up?
This was in the 60s.
Okay. Okay.
61. I got out of the Air Force in 61. So 61, 62, 63.
I
You
see.
know. So I got to where I started digging jazz. So I started playing, I got to be a bebop drummer. And by that time the organ B3 had gotten really popular. And so I started playing with the B3 players. And I did that for I guess about 2 or 3 years. And I was at this club and my homeboys, as we call them, they had a vocal group. They went to California and somehow they got hooked up with doing all the hotels all over the world and doing Las Vegas.
Mhm.
So they called me and said, "Man, I watched." They said, "Be sure and watch us. We coming on the Dean Martin show." So hey, man, Kansas City was a country town, so I thought that they had made the big times. So they said, "Well, hey, man, you come on out." I had just gotten married, and everything had a baby, and we came out, and I couldn't play their music. I could not play. They were playing R&B pop. I could not play their music, and so they had to let me go. So it was very, very rough for me out here at that time. I'd walk 45 and 50 blocks
Mm.
to sit in with the jazz cats, and they wouldn't let me sit in. Man, we don't know you. You know how that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have that thing. And so I had come out here about 3 times. And I met a gentleman by the name of John Boudreaux, who was a famous drummer in New Orleans and had moved out here. He came out here with a group, and I think the group disintegrated. And I think the leader got to be the musical director, and he was doing the TV stuff for Sonny and Cher. But John didn't fare well so easy. However, I had his number, and so I was starving to death with baby and everything. He called me. I mean, I called him. I said, "Man, I'm broke and such thing. I need a gig." "Man, don't worry about it. I'll get you a gig." So he got me a gig with Charles Wright. We making so it was $12 a night. It was at a strip club on Thursday nights. The strippers were off,
Wow.
and so I would get on the bus sometimes, with all my drums to make this gig, and it was he fired me. In fact, he fired me about 5 times because I couldn't play R&B. So he couldn't get nobody else. I think this is probably what happened. Because I talked to a couple of drummers. He probably don't want me to say. Talked to a couple of drummers that just didn't want to work with him. I think they got into it about something. I don't know what it was. But
Sure.
anyway, he said, "Man, just play time. Play fours on the snare, fours on the hi-hat, and fours on the kick drum." And man, that was the hardest thing in the world for me to do because I was free. I got
Right. Right.
and it just didn't make sense. I'm saying, what is this? What kind of groove can I get? Because I'm in space. I'm not pocket like So it took me, and he said, "Don't play no fields." So I did this for about 8 months, and I started to hearing what the R&B thing was. I could hear what was happening, and the one started to make difference to me. I started being able to get a groove. Of course, during that time, Motown was playing a lot of fours. Their music they had a lot of 4/4 stuff.
Right.
Where that
Right.
snare would be playing fours.
Right.
So I mean, I started to, I got to where I could hear it and start being able to play other songs and things of that nature. And so I was able to incorporate. He didn't like the 16 notes at first. until express yourself, and he loved them then, But
Was that a so? Just I want you to finish the story, but you did mention that it's like so out of playing with him after you've been fired and stuff, and then you got back with him, you play with him. At what point did express yourself happen, and how did it happen? Like,
well, he would practice. We would practice, man. We rehearsed 8, 9 hours a day,
wow,
almost every day. And so what this was doing was, and Charles, he was the studio musician.
I
He was
see.
what they call a chink man. He played the chinks. He was left-handed and he played these chinks.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked a lot. So by me experimenting on different things, of course, he didn't like what I would be playing. In the interim of that, I had started getting some scam sessions and stuff. Al McKay, I would pass him sometimes when I would be doing these gigs and stuff. We passed each other one night. He said, "Man, you want a session?" So he got me a session with Dyke, doing Dyke and the Blazers stuff.
Mm.
The guy that did Funky Broadway. I didn't do Funky Broadway, but I did. We got More Soul and Let a Woman Be a Woman and a Man Be a Man, and but
Yeah.
I started to, I would be playing around and stuff, and he heard that Express Yourself beat,
Mm.
and so he liked that one, so he hooked that up. He did the words and everything, and he did he put together the song. That was his thing. He did put that together, and so the 16 notes was in after that with
Wow.
him for a minute.
Yeah.
And
That inspired the song then. So what you're saying is the drums inspired that
yeah, the
song.
drums, yeah.
Wow.
And in the interim of that, I met Bill Withers over to his house. I think he might have managed Bill Withers for a couple of weeks or something. I don't know what kind of situation they had, but I met Bill Withers, and still nothing was happening. But I left the group because I sang a song called "Love Land" that was a big hit.
Oh wow.
A lot of people think he was hit. People think people think that he was singing that. You know, I
Wow.
mean, it would be kind of strange sometimes because we'd open up. It was a big record. We opened up for the Temptations. And they didn't see me because he'd have the horns in front of me and he'd be moving his mouth on the piano and everything. So people thought, oh, it was out, man. It was out.
Oh wow. Really? When he went through that much? Well, that's crazy.
And the
Wow,
Temptations
man.
would tell me, they said, man, you need to sing more. But, that wasn't going to happen. But
Right.
anyway, God bless him. Because, I mean, I did get my funk thing together with him.
Right.
But, we had a disagreement about Love Land because I thought that I should have gotten a percentage of that because I started the musical part of it.
Sure.
And so anyway, I just got to where it was just unbearable to be there for me, and so I left. I just quit, not knowing what I was going to do. I just quit,
Wow.
and yeah, I mean,
Oh.
well, later on, that's where we met. Bill Withers came after he did "Ain't No Sunshine." I think "Ain't No Sunshine" was a big hit. At Grandma's Hand, the single, that was a great record, but for some reason or another, it didn't work for him.
Mm.
It didn't do anything. I think it didn't work for when they put it out as a record.
I see.
Anyway, so I did a couple of gigs with Bill, and I think I started going out with him. I went out with him, but not the rest of the band wasn't going out with him. I went out with him, worked for him, and eventually he came over to the garage, my garage rehearsing, and we got that stuff together. That's where "Use Me" and all that stuff came up. He heard here I was in Spokane, Washington. Because I'd always practice and play around, and we would always rehearse while we was on the road with him.
Mm.
And I came up with that beat, man. He heard that beat, and when we got back to L.A., we went into the studio. They did, Booker T. Jones was producing him, and Booker T. had gotten a contract to produce Willie Nelson. So
Oh.
they didn't have a producer for him. So they gave Bill 3 hours of studio time. And said, we laid that beat down. And
Oh.
the rest was history.
Sure
I mean,
was.
he didn't look back after the Use Me thing.
Sure was.
And so I played with him, and eventually the Watts band guys started leaving, or they got fired, or whatever it was. The group, and so the bass player and the guitars we started playing with Bill Withers.
Wow.
And we toured with him. And we made a couple. I think I might have made 3 albums with him.
Yeah.
And they were successful albums. And one day he told me, "Man, everything you play got them GD 16 notes in it." So I figured, I said, you know what? I better try to find me something else to do, because you can kind of see the writing on the wall. I think he wanted to make another move, and I don't, artists are artists, and people, you know what you want to do.
Right.
I mean, I don't fault that,
Right.
but I mean, a lot of times when you do that, you're leaving the band. Ain't nothing. If you're working, that has happened a lot of times where cats will go solo, and the band ain't nothing happening. That's it for them.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
But I was blessed. One day I was doing a scam session over at the record plant. This when the record plant was on 3rd Street with a guy by the name of Stu Gardner. He was doing, later on he did the music for Bill Cosby. He was doing the Bill Cosby,
Sure.
he do the music. And a contractor saw me by the name of Ben Barrett. James Gadson. Man, we've been looking for you for 2 years. Can you read music? I said, yeah. I was lying like a dog. Because I never seen no drum music,
Right.
So Motown started calling me, and man, I was frightened, because they would have this music, and the producers couldn't read no music, but I thought they could, because I'm studying, and they would tell me something, and it didn't look like what I was studying.
I see.
But eventually I got it together. For some reason or another, they kept me, because Motown, man, was the top. I mean, recording, as far as recording records at the time, that was man. If you was working with Motown out here, that was something.
Sure.
So I would see them call people out if they couldn't cut their part, and I'd be nervous. But for some reason or another, they spared me. What really opened the door for me was Dancing Machine.
Wow.
They had a dotted quarter for me, bomb, and I couldn't read the rest of it right then and there, because I didn't know what it was. So I said bomb, bomb. I said boom, 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 boom with my bass drum, and everything stopped. I said, oh, they got me today. I know I'm gone. You know what I'm saying? So
Wow.
I said, man, well, can you do that again? I said, yeah. So we did Dancing Machine. I was so nervous they had to stop and cut the tape and say, man, just play. Anyway, by that time I had gotten it together after that, because my reading got up to par, and I was not nervous anymore. And things started working for me, and I would work. I worked on my craft, and all praises to God Almighty, because for me to come in, but I'd be reading the album covers and see Joe Sample and Wilton Felder, who was a fantastic saxophone player,
Sure.
was also the bass player on a lot of the Motown hits, especially "I Want You Back" with the Jackson 5. I worked on my craft, and through the grace of God Almighty,
Yeah.
I got to where I could, play the sessions, and by me adding, I guess the coming from a jazz standpoint, the way of speaking, by my rhythms were a little different, because people say, well, man, your thing seems like it's swinging a little bit,
Sure.
So
But
that's, I was able to establish, I don't know
a sound,
what
like I
you would
said,
call it.
I mean,
Yeah, a
from
sound,
yeah,
sound,
yeah,
to where it was working, it's feasible.
yeah.
So that's how that happened,
Well, I mean,
you know.
what I'm seeing from what you're telling me is a lot of people that and first of all, you were writing a whole bunch of music and inspiring a whole bunch of music, whether you knew it or not. And people were realizing that you had something that was you. And so even in the situation with people that were heavily reading, they were making concessions and exceptions because the feel and the creativity was so great. And I feel like those are some of the only times when that is even allowed, when you're doing something that's better than what their intention was, what they had on the paper. You doing something that they weren't even thinking about that carried the music even better. So I think there's something to be
Well,
said
that
about that.
happened. That happened sometime, but I got to where I mean, some of those producers were, you had to play. everything they had written on the paper, open, close, hi-hat, whatever toms, whatever cymbals, crash, cymbals, rhymes. Some of you had to play all of this. Somebody's like playing, it's like somebody was playing the piano.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. The
And
drum
so
staff. Yeah.
I got to where I could read, I got to where I could read it. And, because a lot of times, a lot of times they wrote it down.
Yeah.
Now they might have me in mind a lot of times.
Sure.
They would have me in mind. So it was very, very exciting,
Yeah.
and I still, I love to play, and I still, hey, whatever session it is, I go in there, like the heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, hey, I'm whoever it is, whatever it is, I'm gonna try to do my best.
That's right.
That's what
Yeah.
it is. So
Well, I mean, I think that's amazing because that's one thing that really kind of started going away, which is you see it every once in a while. You see it like in the orchestra world, like or some film scores, or you'll see it occasionally, but most of the time people just start writing for drummers little figures here and there. And
they don't write it no more.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like I do a couple things, like I do this one orchestra thing where I read every note, but that's few and far between, most of the time now, which is something to be said because it's almost like back then people were using the drummer, more for just a person that played drums as an extension of their idea. But now it seems like a lot of people are leaving a lot of interpretation up to drummers that end up inspiring stuff, but they still looked at as just a drummer. It's like we're gonna let you we're gonna give you some space to make it great because it ain't great. We're gonna let you do your thing, but when it comes down to it, oh no, I wrote that.
Yeah, right. That's right.
It's
exactly.
It's
That's
crazy,
exactly
man.
right. Yeah.
It's crazy, man, because you are like, I mean, getting back to the groove for express yourself. I mean, essentially that was coming out. That was a Motown. It was a Motown world back then. So you really changed the cadence. With that song being a hit like that, that really spawned so many songs and projects. It kind of changed the cadence of the time of music, of rhythm, with you adding those 16 notes like that. And I feel like that gets overlooked. It's like, man, that's a huge contribution. I mean, I don't think the cadence really changed. I mean, obviously we're gonna get into your other period, which was doing all those disco records, but it's like that cadence, it kind of stayed for decades. And I remember like in the mid 90s, Timberland did this song with Aaliyah called One in a Million. And that was one of the biggest shifts in cadence that I've seen when the drums went back to halftime, but with the double time fills, that carried on all the way through trap music. But what you did, we can almost look at that as one of the changes of one of the things that changed that Motown groove from being the groove, so it's like, James, I gotta say, man, I mean, I'm glad you're here, man, but I just don't feel like that gets enough praise and respect. I feel like people know your name and people know some of the records you do, but just that alone at the time that it happened really changed music. So, man, I just gotta, again, you know what I'm saying? I gotta give you flowers again because I'm just realizing this now that we talking, man, and that's like that's incredible, man. That's an incredible thing. It's much more than just playing a beat. See, right now a lot of people play stuff, they don't understand why they play it. And so when you were doing it, you were changing things and doing something new. So, man, just much respect for that, and I appreciate the work you've done so that I could have a career. Because listen, people, whether they know it or not, it's a whole group of people, especially some of the main grooves when you go to Nashville, is people basically playing what you was playing 50 years ago. So you know what I mean? That 16th note, kind of funky thing, it's a derivative, man. So it's like, it's amazing because I feel like in the way technology is and the way everything is today, man, we don't really take a lot of time to go look at our history, and how things came to be. So that's why I enjoy that we're having this conversation. As far as country goes and R&B and all that kind of stuff, you know, I know in the 80s you did so many different types of sessions with people like Donald Fagen and every kind of genre of music. You've been sampled all of the time. But tell me how it was doing hundreds of disco records during that period. What was that like in Los Angeles?
Wow. Well, it wasn't very musical for the drummer. I must say, in all respect and no disrespect,
Right.
but you're doing that four on the floor and the hi-hat cymbal thing. I couldn't do it like Earl Young, so I had to come up with the way I did it, and mine was different, but it worked. So that was cool. I mean, I did a lot of disco, and I did so much disco that I had to come and regroup when disco finally phased out because I had played so much four on the floor that I couldn't the other drum patterns and stuff.
Right.
I couldn't play it, man, because I had played four on the floor so much. I had to come back and regroup and practice and get my muscles together in my foot, and you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
People have
Interesting.
armature in their mouth with the foot. I
Yeah.
had to regroup. In other words,
Wow. Because that was so
but it
much
worked
work.
out because I still did get to do some work.
Yeah.
Did get to do some work, so
Now,
that was cool.
during that time period, you played on a whole bunch of records. So now, as a drummer, this is the emergence of, organized drum company business that kind of resembled the sporting community. That was just starting to happen. And, and I'm talking about endorsements. So having
Right.
at that point, you had played on so many records and you had done all that stuff even just up to that point. What was the relationship with your drum company at the time, or did you have a
Well,
relationship?
I didn't have any. I didn't. I would try to get endorsements. Wasn't nothing happening for me. I mean, one guy told me, say, man, bring 30 albums in. I was at the drum shop one day. I can't even remember what drum company it was. And I would bring the 30 albums and he said, man, I didn't hear nothing. And I mean, and then, I would go to the NAMM show and talk to different guys and they would say, yeah, we were going to endorse you. I remember one time it was the company that Purdy plays for.
Sonar.
Sonar. It was the president, man, said, yeah, we're going to endorse you. Hey, man, the people in the United States, what doesn't happen?
Wow.
And he told the guy, to endorse, just said, man, why you keep calling here? That's what he told me.
Wow.
And I play Pearl now. Even Pearl was strange. What happened with me with Pearl was by them doing what they did, a Japanese drummer by the name of Taka Numazawa told the president, and they shipped a set of drums over here to me,
Oh, wow.
behind that. So that was cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, during that time, it was, it was just null and void. Wasn't nothing gonna happen. It just wasn't gonna happen. I mean,
Well, that's interesting. I mean, listen, times have changed, but have they changed? I mean, it's the same. It's different, but it's still the same in a
that's
lot of
true.
different ways, man. It's like, it's an interesting dynamic. You know what I mean? That whole world has always been an interesting dynamic. Obviously it's a lot more, there are programs in place and certain benchmarks, but it's still very political and it's still
Oh yeah, I mean,
interesting.
the drum magazines was null and void for me.
Wow.
I mean, the guy he's not there now, but I can't remember, I can't recall. I wish I could think of his name, but he was I met him at the damn show. Said, "Man, I want to, interview you," and so I was able to through him. I was able to get some interviews,
Right.
but you didn't get no pictures and no front page. I didn't.
Wow.
I know Ndugo had a number. Ndugo played with Michael Jackson, and he should have got a front page on that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, it might have happened. It
you know,
happened after he passed.
it's just it's a little strange for the guys that's doing the work. A lot of times don't get what they should. They just
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just not happening for them.
Yeah. No, I hear that. Well, another thing I want to talk to you about is, so that's in the 70s. That's taking us out of the 70s into the 80s. So in the 80s, LA was kind of like that, it was like one of the most happening scenes, period. LA and New York was really what was happening. But in LA in the 80s, when you saw the shift of a lot of new people coming up, like JR and Vinny was here and Jeff, Picaro, you still played on so many records during that time, and a lot of time on the same records as them. You know what I'm saying? So those producers still were calling you, despite, these guys being kind of the new in guys at the time, and they were still calling you. So what do you think made you have such appeal through all these different genres and all these different producers that they would always still call James Gadson? Because you was still going strong alongside everybody else in LA in the most cracking period of LA. So what do you think that was for?
Well, I guess, a lot of producers, kids would be taking their place as the producers.
I see.
And so I think the producers would tell their kids to call me
Right.
to make sure that you're going to get something. I mean, when I would go in the studio, I would make sure that you were going to get a drum track. If you had to, if you didn't get anything else,
Right.
I would make sure that you're going to get a drum track that you can use. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
there's been situations where I would go in and I've done drum tracks where they had to do everything else over again.
Right.
That's been, so I guess, I would come, hey, I'm going to bring it. In other words, I'm bringing it.
Yeah. Do you think that, do you recall any times that you think you were maybe passed over for something because somebody thought you were mostly just an R&B guy?
Well, they had a 1 year they had, I think I played on more hits than anybody that year. And they had a Grammy for the musicians.
Mm.
And they didn't want to, they didn't even want to, they gave me an honorable mention. They didn't even want to do that. Freddie Perrin, at that time I was working with him, he was producer. I did quite a few hits for him. And he told me, he said, man, they didn't even want to acknowledge you.
Wow. Crazy. That's crazy.
I mean, we know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I mean, we could talk forever. I know you got some things going on. I do want to ask you this last question that I ask all my guests, which is, if you had one experience that you could recall throughout your whole career, what I'm saying, what do you think that would be? What's a moment that you'll never forget? It's a lot, I know.
Well, like the one take things. I thought that, like Reunited was a one take thing. Got to Be Real. What's that thing Smokey did? Cruising. I mean, things like that.
Those were all one takes.
Right. So, it kind of makes you proud.
Of course. Yeah,
but,
man.
I didn't, a lot of, you like, yes, you want to get a trophy if you were on a successful project. A lot of the gold records I don't have. They just wouldn't give them to me.
Wow.
Some of the guys, I mean, like I.G.Y, I thought I was get that. What happened with, and here's the situation with that one. They had called me to do 3 weeks sessions, and they changed their mind. And that's all right. This is the music business, and you change, it's all right.
Right.
You say, well, hey, we're going to use Jeff Curl. So the union required them to give me one session, I guess, because they did it at almost the last minute, which doesn't, they probably wouldn't do that today.
Nah.
So I figured they would just pay me. I figured they would just pay me. Come on in. You got to come in at 5:00. I came in. It was at the Village. They had a drum house inside of the studio.
Right.
I'm thinking, what is this? Inside of it. So nobody was there but me and the click track. So I did I.G.Y and Ruby Baby. I think it might have been 3 or 4. I think those were one of the ones that they kept. But I wasn't in there but about an hour and a half. And the funny thing about it was, cats say, well, hey, man, don't play no Don't play no toms, man, on this record because it ain't no tom record. So by the time I got home, Jeff Carroll called me and said, "Man, can I use your toms?" I said, "Sure." You know, ain't no problem. Jeff Carroll was beautiful. He
Yeah.
was a beautiful individual. You
Yeah.
know, so musicians are cool with most of the time with each other. So, but I mean, it was just a, I wouldn't even go. I was scared to go in the control room after I did what I did because it was nothing but me, the music, me, and the click track.
Wow.
And so
Wow. Oh, that's Donald
I said,
Fagen, I.G.Y. Wow, man.
yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I'm saying, well, hey, I'm not only don't even go in there because I don't know why they mad, but I'm gonna leave it alone.
Right.
But I didn't, I wish I had gotten a gold record for that, and I didn't.
I see.
Because I think that album was #1, and that was the #1 song for him.
Oh yeah, that was a classic. That's a classic.
And quite a few of Barbara Streisand, she did send me some champagne. I did her stuff. A lot of times you like to get that.
Sure.
You like to get that trophy.
Yeah.
But I think that hey, if you do something of that nature, I think they should reward you. I
Sure.
just
Yeah. Well, I mean, you also worked with Paul McCartney and Beck and all these other kind of
Right.
people. I mean, did you ever? Here's the question that I meant to ask you, and I know you have some stuff to do, but have you ever been in a session where you felt like you were just being exploited, like where you felt like, oh, they just calling me because they heard I played on this record, they really don't know me, or they really don't, you know what I'm saying? They really don't care about me. Really, they just want to be able to use my name. Like, have you ever felt that through a session?
I have never felt that. It might have been that way, but I've never felt that.
I see.
Paul McCartney was very nice. Paul McCartney is a drummer, so I mean, but for me to play on his record, that was pretty.
Yeah. Well, anything for the new generation of drummers coming up, that you want to share, you know what I'm saying? Like for a cat coming up in this trying to be a drummer now. I mean, some of the lessons you learned, like something you want to tell them.
I think that they should learn the pockets. I mean, so they can learn the feel of what the music is about. Feeling has a lot to do with what the music is about. Just I would tell them to make sure that they learn the music business.
I see.
That I didn't have all that together, and a lot of songs that I could have been included on as far as the writing. If you didn't get the business straight right then and there, it was too late. That was it.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well,
they'll definitely learn the music business.
yeah. Well, I mean, listen, what you did, kind of put a battery in the back of the next generation, you know what I'm saying? And people to try to make sure that we do learn that stuff and that we, make sure that it's better for us moving forward. And that was all because you started it. And it's like you sacrificed for what this new generation has been learning and learning every generation after that, to try to get better and try to get better and try to get better. So, I appreciate you for the sacrifices you made because clearly right now, what you were doing, I mean, is no different than a person that calls himself a producer that goes into the studio with their laptop and on the beat that, all they did is make a beat and then they're a producer, right? So you were so you were doing what a lot of people have made careers of and called themselves a producer. You was doing that behind the drum set, 50 years ago. So there's something to be said about how that's kind of, moved and morphed into all these different titles. Cause I know you remember in the 80s when the drum machines was cracking, cats that programmed the drum machine were programmers. You know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden that shifted to producer, and they still only did drums, so these titles and the business, everything has shifted a lot. And I believe that a lot of it has to do with the catalyst of people like yourself that just had a different frame of mind. It forced people to think differently and respect our instrument. So what you did and a handful of others forced people to say drums are important to every song. And if we don't have the drums right, we're not going to have the songs right. So we need to start making sure these drummers are good. And that is something 1,000,000% that I give credit to you for. Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, man.
Wow.
So, well, listen, Mr. Gasson, I can't say thank you enough, man. I could sit here and geek out with you all day, man, but I want to be respectful of your time. And, you know, we can always come back and do another one another time. But I just, you've been a big inspiration to me, man, in a lot of different ways. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, you worked with my dad at a period, but I was young then, so I wasn't, you know, receiving it the same way. But just as a man, definitely as a Black man, to see you jump through all these different genres and play on all these different records, that's what made me feel like I could do it. You know what I mean? So for that, I got to say thank you, man, because there's a lot of people out here that, you know, now when we make music, we just make music. Nobody really trips off of that. I've definitely heard about a few weird things in Nashville, but I've never experienced that, right? So, you know, it's like people just call drummers for drummers, and it doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter what your primary thing is. If you can cut it and it feels good, people want to call you. And I think you broke a lot of those stereotypes down. You know, it's a handful of people, you, Bernard, you know, it's only a few, Earl, you know, that broke those stereotypes down. So I'm just telling you now, if nobody else told you, thank you, because that's important, man. And you know, sometimes we don't realize what the sacrifice happened before for us to get to where we are, to be moving around freely. So, you know, I just want to say thank you for all your navigation, man, and giving us that, you know, that guideline, that blueprint. And I got this hat, man. I bought this hat when I was in Nashville.
Okay.
And then I stopped wearing it because I realized, man, I wonder, does he even get anything for this? And I'm sure the answer is probably no. Right. And, you know, admiration is one thing, but we also got to look on the other side of admiration that could easily be exploitation. And I think that, you know, you're an iconic name and everybody knows what you do, but I think that the business needs to reflect that. So currently, what's your drum situation currently, as far as like, you know, companies and all that kind of stuff?
I think I'm still with DW. I'm not sure. It's been a while since I've heard anything from them.
Okay.
You know.
Well, I'll make sure that changes. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an honor to interview the inimitable Mr. James Gadson, one of the greatest to ever do it. I'm just going to go out on a limb and just say that you are, pound for pound, you know, one of the greatest session musicians that we've ever had in the whole history of music. Man. You know, yeah. So, you know, it's an honor for me, and I think that all the people that are discovering you during this interview and now we'll be able to go back and listen to some of the records or realize that you're on some of the records that they already know. I think hearing these stories from you is very inspiring, especially that one take stuff, man. That's amazing. Those stories are amazing, man. All right. Well, I appreciate you, bro. I'm gonna chop this up.
And I appreciate you too.
Yeah, all good, man. All good.
All right.
If this content is something that you're interested in, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check the links in the description for all the gear that we use and all of our various products that we have available. Not to mention, you can head over to TrevorLawrenceJr.com, check out our merch, and also the new project that just dropped. It's called Tech Support, which is an EP available on all streaming platforms. Also, the new app that just dropped, the Prompt Deucer app, is a prompting and caption assistant, and that's available on the Apple iOS store. I now have a playlist called the 20 for 20 playlist, and you can check that link in the description, and it'll just give you a body of work from my guests, especially the inimitable Mr. James Gadson, and let you get familiar with his work and some of the things he's played on that you may or may not know. So that's the 20 for 20 playlist. That link is in the description as well. So until next time, it's the TrevBeats Show. We out.
It's the TrevBeats Show, and we out. We out. We out. We out. We out. We out. It's the TrevBeats Show, and we out. It's the TrevBeats. It's the TrevBeats Show, and we out.